This is a podcast from soof.co.uk. Hello, I'm Patrick Downs. This is all about film, whether it be Blu-ray, DVD or streaming. This is Bring the Film. Based on the extraordinary character at the centre of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Roald Dahl's most iconic children's book and one of the best-selling children's books of all time, Wonka tells the wondrous story of how the world's greatest inventor, magician and chocolate maker became the beloved Willy Wonka we know today.
Gotcha! What the devil? Let me out of here! I demand to be released!
Incredible. I can speak.
Well, of course I can speak. Now let me out of here or I shall shriek. Let me out!
Not until I take a good look at you.
Good evening.
So you're the funny little man who's been following me.
Funny little man. How dare you? I will have you know that I am a perfectly respectable size for an Oompa Loompa.
An Oompa what now?
In fact, in Loompa Land, I am regarded as something of a whopper. They call me Lofty.
Directed by Paul King, starring Timothée Chalamet, Calah, Keegan-Michael, Paterson, Joseph, Matt Lucas and Mathew Baynton. But our correspondent STEPH HITCH caught up with Paul King, the writer-director, about what fans could expect from the much-anticipated film.
Well, a lot of chocolate is the main thing that I think people will get. It's the story of young Willy Wonka and how he became the character that we all know and love from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie. It tells the story of young Willy Wonka who sort of arrives like this sort of magical figure on a boat out of the mist in this European city, which is very much the snooty, noses in the air, self-appointed home of chocolates, where all the finest chocolate makers have their shops. And Willy is a bit of a scruffy, rough around the edges young man, but also a chocolate-making genius. And he is a wide-eyed optimist who assumes that that's more than enough to get him embraced in the loving arms of this city. But he's quickly going to discover that the world is not quite that straightforward.
And it must have been so much fun kind of doing some of the research. I'm guessing a lot of chocolate eating.
A lot of chocolate.
What was the inspiration?
Yeah, I was as thin as Timothée Chalamet when I began this film, and it's very disappointing that he now weighs the same as one of my legs. But I've had a lot of good chocolate, so it swings and roundabouts. We had an on-set chocolate maker who was a genius and fed me very well and plentifully.
Excellent. And for you, where does this kind of sit between the books and then the other film adaptations?
I sort of grew up loving Roald Dahl, especially Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It was absolutely my favourite book, and that was the first of his I discovered, and I had a paperback copy which I read and reread so often in the way that you do when you're falling in love with something as a kid, and until the pages fell out of the covers. And it was probably the first proper funny book that I read, you know, that could make you laugh on every page, and was such an extraordinary world that it created, this sort of heightened storybook world where four grandparents could live in a bed, and somebody's job was putting the caps on toothpaste. It's extraordinary creation that Roald Dahl came up with, not to mention Willy Wonka and the Extraordinary Chocolate Factory. And when I was young, I remember laughing so much and finding all the comedy so funny, and all the poems, the sort of songs that the Oompa Loompas sing in it, and laughing. And then when David Heyman, the producer, mentioned that he was interested in making a young Willy Wonka film, I went back and read it again, and what I found as a grown-up was that it was incredibly moving, and I sort of got to the end of it and wept in a way that I don't often weep while reading things for sort of work purposes. And it's got this extraordinary beating heart of Charlie and this very sort of Dickensian emotional story, and I think that's why it's endured so brilliantly beyond all the comedy and all the kind of fireworks of the Chocolate Factory and the extraordinary inventions, is that you are rooting for Charlie in a way that is very profound and really beautiful. And I think that combination of things, sort of rediscovered reading it as a grown-up, was hugely informative to me, or formative to me as a sort of writer and filmmaker. That's what I like. I like comedy and heart put together, and it was really wonderful to be able to rediscover that and go, oh, I think this is where it all came from. And so it's been lovely to kind of walk around in those shoes for a few years.
Did you go back and reread a lot of his other works as well?
Yeah, I read everything I could get my hands on. I mean, I even read his Guide to Railway Safety, which is extremely funny. And you go, only Roald Dahl can make a Guide to Railway Safety this funny. And it's got this extraordinary moment moment where a child leans out of the window. It says, "Don't lean out of the window." And the illustration that Quentin Blake did is a child whose head has been blown clean off by another train. And you go, well, that's why they're funny, and that's why they're brilliant, that you go, the driest of all possible topics he could make funny and naughty and subversive, and you go, I can't believe you did that. You know, it's got that frisson of wickedness, which is so extraordinary. And I think that was the best bit of the whole process for me, because I got to read all the children's stories, which I knew very well anyway, and but all the stuff that he wrote for adults too, which is so extraordinary. And he's such a master of storytelling. I know I'm not the first person to discover this, but it is quite amazing how he'll set up a premise of a story, and within a page you're going, I can't put this down, I cannot look away, what is going to happen? And that's Roald Dahl's genius.
And I have to ask about our leading man here, Timothée Chalamet. Was he always going to be the one for you?
Well, so long as I could get him to say yes, he was, yes, absolutely going to be the one. I mean, I think Timothy's an extraordinary actor. He's quite unbelievable. He's very precise and very controlled and knows exactly what is going on, but at the same time can harness these great depths of emotion and sort of dig into his soul and his consciousness of what it is to be a human at a deeply profound level, which was incredibly impressive. And I've only rarely seen in the 47 years I've been on this planet. It was such a privilege to work with him. I think he's a complete genius. And he can also sing like an angel and dance like Fred Astaire. So all in all, he's a very annoying young man who seems to have no end to his talents. And I wish him nothing but the worst.
And Hugh Grant, another project with him. What was that phone call like when you were like, can you be an Oompa Loompa, please?
It was very easy this time. I sort of felt when I asked him to be in Paddington 2, it was a bit more of a stretch to go, oh, there's this vain, washed up old ham, and I thought of you. And it was a bit of an awkward conversation. But fortunately, we seemed to enjoy working with each other. I certainly enjoyed working with him on Paddington 2. And I would like to work with him on everything I do. He's the funniest person I know. And once I started reading those Oompa Loompa stories and reading the books, obviously they only sing in the movies. When you read Dahl's verse that he writes in the books, and they're so funny and they're so cutting and sarcastic, and they take this gleeful, mischievous delight in the demise of all these ghastly children. And just Hugh's voice began to sort of come to me as I read those, and suddenly it was like a light bulb moment when you go, Hugh Grant's an Oompa Loompa, yes please, I'm there.
Absolutely. And the rest of the cast is like a who's who of British talent. Can you tell us what we can expect?
It's unbelievable who was prepared to come out and play, which was, I take as a huge compliment. Obviously, we had to pay them all vast amounts of money because they'd rather be doing anything else. But no, we're very, very lucky with who we've got. So we've got Olivia Colman as evil Mrs. Scrubbit, who runs a wash house and is certainly the nastiest character I've ever written. And she's got a great sidekick played by Tom Davis, who's also very briefly in Paddington 2. And they're Scrubbit and Bleacher, these evil wash house entrepreneurs. And then we've got the chocolate cartel, we call them, who are Slugworth, Fickelgruber and Prodnose, and they're the three grand chocolatiers in this town. And they're played by Paterson Joseph and Mathew Baynton and Matt Lucas, three of the great British comedians that I know of, and they were all absolutely brilliant. We've also got Sally Hawkins, who plays Willy's mother, who's amazing, and obviously I worked with him Paddington and Paddington 2, one of the great actresses out of her generation. And and there's also Rowan Atkinson, who pops up. So it really is a kind of ridiculous. And Keegan-Michael Key is our chief of police. Everyone is unbelievable, and working with the cast was just a treat like you couldn't believe.
I'm a massive Horrible Histories fan, so I always love seeing Simon Farnaby pop up at any point.
Yes.
What was the writing process like with him for this?
Well, I've written with Simon before, and it's a pleasure. He's just a lovely person to spend time with and incredibly funny. He can put up with me for vast periods of time, which is not easy to do. It was lovely. We really just tried to channel Roald Dahl and sort of read everything that he'd written, or at least I did. I'm not sure Simon did all the research. I do the research side of things, and he just rolls in around 11 and is effortlessly funny and then knocks off around 2. He's got a lovely life. I work long hours to try and keep up with him.
And we see some glimpses in the trailer, but what were the benefits for you when it came to filming on location?
Oh, well, we really didn't film on location very much at all. We were going to, because I kind of really wanted this to be able to exist alongside, well, both the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movies, but especially the 1971 one, which was very dear to my heart growing up. And that was sort of shot mostly in Germany and sort of has this kind of European sensibility, as well as sort of actors from all around the world. And Gene Wilder, obviously, an American at the heart of it. And I was interested in recreating that. And the first impulse was to go and find a sort of European location, but it was the middle of COVID and that was sort of impossible. So luckily, Warner Brothers, deep pockets, agreed to build a kind of European city at Leavesden, which was quite extraordinary. A real privilege to be able to sort of build a world like that. And I think actually a much better outcome for the movie, because I think Dahl is very specifically non-specific in where it's set. So Grandpa Joe will say, get that mud off your pants. And you sort of go, well, that doesn't sound English, but some of it seems English. And Charlie seems like quite an English character, but then there's Augustus Gloop, who feels very German, and Mike TV, who feels very American. And I think it's very specifically set in a sort of slightly storybook stylized world where these kind of larger than life characters can sit more comfortably than if it was just walking along a regular street. And so to be able to do that was extraordinary and great fun.
I was in Bath a couple of days before, I think.
We did shoot in Bath, yes.
So there was a lot of people like, oh my God, I think I saw him.
Yes. So we did some stuff. We shot mostly, weirdly, in places that you feel Jane Austen would go. So we built mostly the city, and then we shot in Lyme Regis and Bath and Oxford, and a little bit in a village in Oxfordshire where my mum and dad live. But that was pure coincidence.
So when you came around to build this massive set, what were the designs, the inspirations? I'm guessing the storyboard was...
Yeah. There was a lot of mood boards going on. And because it was COVID, we sort of done all this kind of like obsessive Googling of all the great European cities. But I sort of wanted to make this kind of, like I say, a sort of snooty, self-appointedly important city that's the home of chocolate and where all the finest chocolate makers have their shops. So I was looking at squares and those countries that sort of exist across borders, I suppose. I sort of was interested in that sort of Swiss feel of like, multiple languages being spoken and a sort of melting pot that seems to be like a melting pot of the world, but in reality, certainly in our story, is very much not that. And there's a sort of galleria at the heart of it, which was very inspired by the one in Milan, which is sort of very much the home of fashion, and it's got those the kind of great stores in the corners, and I can't remember what they are, but it's like Prada and Louis Vuitton or whatever. I mean, look at me, I'm not a fashion icon. It felt like that would be a lovely, to do the sort of culinary equivalent of that, the Galerie Gourmet, we call it.
And finally, can you tell me a little bit about what your favourite day on set was?
Films seemingly always end up being shot in a very odd order, and quite towards the end of our process we had one of our first scenes, which is when Willy first arrives at Scrubberton Bleacher, this kind of wash house, a guest house and laundry, and meets Olivia Colman and Tom Davis and Calah Lane, who plays Noodle, this young girl, for the first time. We'd done so much around it, and this was the sort of scene that I really felt was like the heart of the Dahl spirit in the movie, and they're all so brilliant and so funny, and they were all just bouncing off each other, and
Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you a brand new contraption of my creation, an innovation in longification. Scrub? Let me ask you a question. How does Tiddles want to spend all his time chasing after mailmen? And what do I have to do all day, fellow scrubbers? Please. Scrub. But now, with Willy Wonka's wild and wonderful wishy-washy Wonka Walker, please don't make me say that again, Tiddles gets to run, and I can have fun. Scrub. Just popping out for a bit. I'll be back before roll call. Until then, Tiddles has agreed to... Scrub.
Starring Timothée Chalamet in the title role, directed by Paul King. It's Wonka and is available now. And with that, thanks for checking me out on the Bring the Film podcast today. I'm Patrick Downs, and you can keep in touch across Twitter at I'm Patrick Downs, also on Instagram or facebook.com/officialpoptart. And there's also the website soof.co.uk. This is a podcast from soof.co.uk.